For reminding my in-laws who owns the house after they demanded my divorce? The smell of Linda's pot roast filled the dining room of our townhouse in Chicago's Wicker Park neighborhood. It was an ordinary Sunday, the first one Brooke and Derek were spending with his parents since returning from their honeymoon. Brooke, although with some reservations, wanted to get along. "Derek, honey, bring me the baking sheet," Linda said from the kitchen in a sweet voice. "You, Brooke, could stir the sauce. It needs a woman's touch, which is gentler." Brooke rolled her eyes but smiled. She took the wooden spoon. "Sure, Linda." Derek walked in, winked at his wife, and took out the tray. His father, Robert, was already sitting at the head of the table leafing through the newspaper. "It smells wonderful, Linda," Robert said without looking up. "It is my mother's recipe. She always used to say that the kitchen is the true heart of a home." The women from back then understood that. The food was served. Everyone sat down. Linda began serving large portions to her son and husband. "For the working man's strength," she declared, placing a huge piece of meat on Derek's plate. Then a noticeably smaller portion for Brooke. "For us women, watching our figure is enough." Brooke looked at her plate, then at her husband's. Derek ate with his head down, smiling nervously. "To be honest, Linda," Brooke said, trying to keep her smile from cracking, "with the pace of work I have at the law firm, I need almost as much energy as Derek." Linda laughed, a short, dry sound. "Oh dear, but outside work is just that, outside. The work inside the home is what really matters. Do you not think so, Robert?" Robert nodded while chewing. "Of course. A man needs a home in order. That brings peace." "I think we all make a home in order together," Brooke replied, her voice a little tenser. "Derek is actually pretty good at washing the dishes, to be honest." Linda put down her fork with a slight clack. "My Derek washing dishes? What nonsense. In my day, my father did not even know where the plates were kept. And my mother, God rest her soul, would have never sat at the table if my grandfather did not give her permission. Those were different times, with more respect." The air thickened. Derek touched Brooke's arm under the table. "Mom, customs are different now," he said in a conciliatory tone. "Brooke and I split the chores. It works for us. Customs. Linda shook her head with a condescending smile. "Some new customs are nothing more than a lack of manners. A woman with sense should know her place. And her place is not competing with her husband, but supporting him." From behind, without drawing too much attention, Brooke felt a heat rise up her neck. She had studied for 6 years, had passed the grueling bar exam, had earned her position through sheer hard work, and now her place was from behind. "I support Derek," she said, measuring every word. "And he supports me. That is a marriage, a team, not a general and his maid." Robert lowered the newspaper and shot her a grave look. "Brooke, you respect your mother-in-law. She has raised a great man. She knows what she is talking about." "I am not disputing her experience, Robert. I am talking about my life, about our life." "Your life is now part of this family," Linda said, her initial sweetness evaporating. "And families have their rules. Here on Sundays we eat what I cook and we talk about what is important. Family continuity." She paused dramatically and fixed her eyes on Brooke. "By the way, have you two thought about having children yet? A child would give meaning to all of this. Brooke, it would anchor you." Brooke was left breathless. Derek cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mom, please, it is very early. Let us enjoy being newlyweds." "Early? At your age, I was already expecting you. The biological clock does not wait, dear. And a man needs an heir to feel complete, so that his efforts have meaning." Brooke could no longer contain herself. "And a woman, Linda, what does a woman need a child for? To anchor herself? Or maybe to feel complete by fulfilling herself in what she studied, in what she is passionate about." Linda looked at her as if she had spoken in ancient Greek. "A woman's greatest passion must be her family. Everything else is just whims of modernity." "Oh, Derek," she sighed, addressing her son with feigned pity. "I told you a lawyer would be complicated." That was the last straw. Derek, instead of defending her, placed a hand over his mother's. "Come on, Mom, do not start. Brooke is great. It is just that sometimes our ideas are different. We have to adapt." Adapt. The word echoed in Brooke's ears like a death sentence. It was not supporting each other. It was not defending themselves. It was adapting. She was the odd piece that had to be polished to fit. Yes, Brooke said, leaving her napkin next to her plate. Her voice was surprisingly clear and cold. Ideas are different. And adapting is a two-way street, do you not think? She stood up. Excuse me. I have suddenly lost my appetite. Derek, are you coming? Derek looked at his mother, at his father, at Brooke standing there. The conflict tensed his face. Brooke, honey, sit down. Do not ruin the meal. Mom did not mean any harm. Linda put on an expression of a wounded victim. Of course not. I only think of your well-being. Of the family's well-being. Brooke looked at the three of them. Derek, trapped in his divided loyalty. Robert, taking refuge behind his newspaper as if the conflict had nothing to do with him. And Linda, with that look of someone who possesses the absolute truth, immutable as granite. At that moment, Brooke did not see her in-laws. She saw a wall of old and worn-out traditions, of rigid expectations, of a respect that was merely submission in disguise. And she saw her husband not on the other side of the wall, but perched on top of it, indecisive, asking her not to make any noise. She did not say anything else. She turned around and left the dining room. She heard Derek mutter an apology and her mother-in-law say in a calculatedly audible whisper, "Leave her. It is just newlywed stuff. She will learn." Brooke went up the stairs to the bedroom they shared, her heart beating hard against her ribs. It was not anger yet. It was something deeper and colder. The certainty, the absolute certainty that this had not just been a bad start. This was the preview. The prologue to a battle she had not chosen, but that she now understood she would have to fight. And the most terrifying thing was not Linda's opposition. It was the doubt of whether Derek would ultimately be by her side in the trenches, or if he would remain comfortably seated at the table, asking her not to ruin the meal. The days following that Sunday dinner passed in a tense, cold peace. Brooke and Derek barely spoke about the incident. He was more affectionate and brought flowers. He insisted on washing up after dinner. It was his way of apologizing without having to utter words that might challenge his mother. Brooke accepted the gestures, but a subtle distance had settled between them. The image of Derek, silent in the face of Linda's comments, would not erase itself from her mind. It was her own mother, Susan, who called her midweek. Her voice, always practical and direct, sounded worried. "Brooke, honey, are you okay? You sound distant." "I am fine, Mom. Just a little tired with the new case." "Do not lie to me. It is your mother-in-law, is it not?" Brooke sighed. Her mother had an infallible radar. She slumped onto her office sofa, looking at the gray Chicago sky through the window. It was silly. A comment from another era. It is over now. Comments from another era are the most dangerous ones, honey, because those who say them believe they are divine laws. There was a pause. Susan changed her tone. "Listen, I need you to come by the house. I have some papers from your grandmother Evelyn for you. Inheritance stuff we always put off. Now it cannot wait. I would rather not right now. It is important." So Brooke went that very afternoon to the apartment in Lakeview where she grew up. The smell of cleanliness and books enveloped her. The scent of a refuge. Susan greeted her with a strong kiss and looked her up and down. "Yeah, you look awful. Sit down. I will make you some tea." "Mom, the papers." "First the tea and the chat." While the water boiled, Susan spoke without looking at her, busy with the cups. "Your grandmother Evelyn loved you more than anyone in this world. She knew you were strong, different, just like she was in her own way. That is why she made a very clear decision with the little she had. She took out a manila folder, worn at the corners, and placed it on the kitchen table. When your father and I separated and things got complicated, your grandmother did something. She used all her savings, plus a small severance package she received, and bought this townhouse. A modest place in a neighborhood that back then was not what it is now, but it was hers alone. She always said, "A woman needs a roof that is hers alone, just in case things go wrong." Brooke felt a strange shiver. She knew which property she was talking about. The townhouse where you now live with Derek and your in-laws. That property, she started to say with a hoarse voice, was hers, and she left it to you in her will. With a life estate for me as long as I live. But the property is yours, Brooke, yours alone. The papers are here, the deed, everything. Brooke opened the folder with fingers that trembled slightly. There was her name, the property description, the address, the date of acquisition, years before she even met Derek. But when we got married, when we said we needed a bigger place, that his parents wanted to come live in Chicago, you offered that townhouse. You said it was yours, that we could use it. And it was. It is mine to use while I live, and I can assign its use to whomever I want. And I wanted to assign it to my daughter and my son-in-law. But the property, Brooke, the ultimate ownership, is yours. It always has been. Susan took her hand. I did not say anything before because it did not seem important. You were happy. Derek is a good guy deep down. And I thought it would be a nice touch for your grandmother's house to be your family's home. But now, hearing your voice, now I think it is important that you know. It is your house, your sanctuary, your territory. Never forget that. Brooke looked at the papers. Her house. Linda and Robert lived under her roof. They dictated their absurd rules in her space. A wave of something solid, powerful began to grow in her chest. It was not anger yet. It was possession. It was legal certainty. Derek knows, right? No. Your grandmother was very clear. That only you should know until you needed to. So that no one, not even a husband in love, could use that information in any other way. She was a wise woman, my mother. Meanwhile, in the living room of her house, Linda took advantage of the fact that Brooke had stayed late at work, the excuse Brooke had used, to have a heart-to-heart talk with her son. Derek, exhausted, collapsed into the armchair. Son, you look awful, Linda began, stroking his hair like when he was a little boy. It is work, Mom. A lot of pressure. Pressure is easier to bear with a house in order, with a woman who truly takes care of you. Her voice was as sweet as honey, but her eyes were sharp. Brooke is very modern, very independent. That is all very well for dating, but for a marriage needs hierarchy, Derek. Like your father had. And I always knew my place and he his. And that is how there is peace. Mom, please do not start again. Brooke and I have our own balance. Balance? Linda let out a little laugh. Son, I saw her the other day arguing, giving lectures. That is not being a wife. A wife supports. She does not dispute, especially in front of others. She leaned toward him, lowering her voice. Look, I know you love her, but a woman like that needs an anchor. Something to calm her down, to center her priorities. What do you mean? Derek asked with an uncomfortable premonition. A child, Derek. A child changes everything. It gives a woman a true purpose. She stops thinking so much about herself, her career, her ideas. She thinks about the family, about the future. She squeezed his hand. It is what she needs. And you too, an heir. You will see how after becoming a mother she softens. She will find her place. Truly. Derek shifted in the armchair. The idea of a child was not unpleasant to him. In the abstract, it even excited him. But the way his mother presented it, as a tool for domestication, made his stomach tie in knots. It is too soon, Mom. We have not been married long. We want to enjoy ourselves, travel. Travel. You can travel with children. And as for enjoying yourselves, Linda made a gesture of contempt. That sounds like selfishness. My generation was not taught to enjoy ourselves that way. We were taught to build, to sacrifice. And look, your father and I have had a happy marriage. Happy? Derek went quiet. Was he happy? His father seemed satisfied. Yes. His mother always said she was, but he remembered a silent house, a mother always in the background, a father whose word was law. Was that happiness? He was not sure. But contradicting his mother on this was like contradicting a force of nature. I do not know, Mom. It is our decision, Brooke's and mine. Of course, son. Of course, Linda said, pulling her hand back. Her victory was already singing in her mind. I am just giving you a mother's advice. Think about what is best for your family, for your future. Sometimes love needs a little push, a direction. Talk to her gently. Women, when they truly love, they yield. When Brooke returned later, the inheritance papers carefully tucked away at the bottom of her purse, Derek was blankly watching television. He greeted her with a distracted kiss. Everything okay at work? Yes, sir. And here? Fine. My mother has been giving me the usual lecture. he said, trying to make it sound like a joke, but his exhaustion gave him away. Brooke sat next to him studying his profile. She loved him. She still loved him deeply. But she loved the man she married, not this tired man trapped between two women. "And what did the lecture say today?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Oh, you know. Family, the future, the importance of establishing roots." Roots, Brooke thought. An anchor. Words that sounded like a prison. "Roots like children?" she asked directly. Derek looked surprised. Then he looked toward the kitchen, where the sound of dishes being put away by Linda came from. "Well, yes. Partly. She thinks it would be good for us, that it would center us." Brooke felt the weight of the papers in her purse on the other side of the room. Her house, her rules, her life. "Derek," she said softly, "if we ever have a child, it will be because we both truly want it. Not because your mother thinks it is the way to turn me into the daughter-in-law she has in her head. Do you understand the difference?" Derek looked at her, and for a second he saw the firmness in her eyes, the same firmness that sometimes made her unstoppable in court. He nodded slowly. "I understand. Of course I understand." But Brooke knew with a certainty that froze her blood, that he did not fully understand it, or did not want to understand it. Because understanding it would mean having to confront his mother. And Derek, her husband, the love of her life, preferred to adapt. He preferred to ask her to adapt. She got up and went toward the bedroom. As she passed the kitchen, she saw Linda meticulously drying a plate, a small smile on her lips. The smile of someone who believes they are winning a silent, slow, inevitable war. Brooke pressed her purse against her side. Inside, her grandmother's property deed seemed to beat like a paper heart. A secret, a weapon, a truth that for now she would keep to herself. But the next time Linda tried to lay down the law in her house, maybe she would not stay quiet. Maybe, just maybe, she would decide to remind everyone exactly whose ground they were standing on. The piece was a mirage. I knew it when I saw the linen tablecloth, the one only used for special occasions, spread over the dining room table. Linda was already polishing the wine glasses with an almost religious fervor. "My sister Barbara and her family are coming today," she announced without looking at me as I entered the kitchen looking for coffee. "I have prepared a roast beef dinner. I will need help." It was not a request. It was an order. Derek had already left for work, and Robert was reading the newspaper in the living room, oblivious to the whirlwind of preparations. "I have to work late on a report, Linda," I said, and I was not lying. The new case was consuming me. She put down the glass, which was already shining like a perfect diamond. "On a Sunday, Brooke? Family comes first. Barbara does not come from Peoria every month. Your report can wait." "My report cannot wait. It is for the trial court, first thing Monday morning." Linda sighed. A long, long-suffering sigh, directed more at the cooking pots than at me. In my day, a woman knew where her priorities were. "But fine, I will do what I can by myself, as always. You go mind your business." The tension was a tight thread about to snap. I decided not to take the bait. I poured my coffee and locked myself in the small study we used as an office. But concentration was impossible. The noise of doors, the bustle, the aroma of garlic and rosemary slipping under the door. Everything screamed that this was her territory, her kingdom, and I was an intruder with misplaced priorities. At 3 o'clock sharp they arrived. Barbara was a harder, more angular version of Linda. Her husband, Gary, a silent man with large hands, and their 2 teenage daughters who looked at me with a curiosity halfway between mocking and pitying. "Oh, it has been so long, Linda," Barbara exclaimed, kissing her sister effusively. "And this must be the famous lawyer Brooke, right?" Derek was always a lucky guy, looking for something different. The compliment was a poison dart. I smiled just enough. "Nice to meet you. Derek misses you, but a work commitment came up." "Men and their work," Gary said with a deep laugh, patting Robert on the back, who nodded like an automaton. "The important thing is that the women have the table set and the house warm for us, Robert?" That is right, Robert muttered. The meal was a torment. I occupied my usual seat, next to Derek, whose empty chair seemed to scream. Linda and Barbara served, fluttered around, making sure no plate was half empty. I tried to get up to help, but Linda put a heavy hand on my shoulder. No, no, you stay. You are the guest today with so much work. We will manage. Barbara laughed. Linda, how thoughtful. But dear, a woman does not like to feel useless in her own home. Maybe Brooke could bring the water. It is not heavy. The message was clear. My place was not at the table being served. My place was serving. I got up cold and brought the pitcher of water. As I sat down, Gary spoke with his mouth full. So, a lawyer. Very tough cases, huh? A lot of street stuff. I would be scared to have my wife mixing with those people. Troublemakers, crooks. Not all of them are crooks. Most are normal people with problems, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Problems that are fixed with hard work and respect for the law. Woman, Robert interjected, finally finding a topic to weigh in on. Not with lawyers looking for loopholes. Linda, serving more roast to Gary, nodded solemnly. It is a very aggressive world for a woman. Very sordid. It is not natural. A woman should bring sweetness, peace, not lawsuits. Barbara took over like in a choreographed dance. Totally. My girls, you see, are studying teaching. A beautiful career with children. That is truly feminine. Useful. Have you not thought about something more peaceful, Brooke? For when the children arrive, which they will, of course. She smiled at me, and her smile was a steel trap. Although with how independent you are, maybe you give more priority to your career. That is how youth is today. A lot of my fulfillment. They forget that family is in us. I felt the anger, cold and sharp, settle in my stomach. I looked at Robert. I looked at the two girls who lowered their eyes, blushing. I looked at Derek's empty seat. A family is in us, I said, and my voice sounded clearer than I expected in the dining room. But an us is built with two whole people, not with half people. I do not give up who I am to be a wife, and I hope I will not have to do it to be a mother. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Linda turned pale. Barbara's eyes widened. Wow, Gary finally said, shaking his head with a mocking smile. With those ideas, it is no wonder you are taking so long. Derek will have to set you straight. You will see how with a baby in your arms all that nonsense will pass. That was the spark. The spark that lit the fuse that had been slowly burning for weeks. Gary, I said, placing my fork on the plate with a precise click. My ideas and my life are none of your business, nor the business of this table. The silence this time was absolute. Chilling. Even the tick-tock of the wall clock sounded like a hammer blow. Linda jumped up. How dare you? Her voice was a muffled scream, trembling with rage. Is that how you speak to a guest in my house? To family. In my house. The words rang in my ears, mixing with the furious pounding of my blood. The image of the papers in my mother's manila folder appeared crystal clear before me. No, Linda, I said, standing up as well. I could no longer stay seated. I was no longer going to stay seated. That is how I speak to a man who gives his opinion on my life without anyone asking him. And this, I made a broad gesture that encompassed the dining room, the house, everything. This is not just your house. Linda took a step toward me, defiant. Barbara grabbed her arm. Linda, calm down. It is not worth it. It is not worth it. Look at how she talks to me. Look at the manners, Linda said, pointing an accusing finger at me. At my own table. After everything I have done, Derek will have to hear about this. He will have to put things in order. Robert finally spoke with the deep voice of an offended patriarch. Brooke, this has gone too far. Apologize. I looked at all of them now. At Gary, satisfied with the spectacle. At Barbara with her false restraint. At the terrified girls. At Robert demanding submission. At Linda, victorious in her role as the outraged victim. No. This time I have nothing to apologize for, I said, and my voice did not tremble. The one who should apologize is her, for trying to humiliate me at every meal, and you for allowing and supporting it. I held Robert's gaze until he looked away. Then I looked directly at Linda. The dinner was delicious, Linda, as always. It is a pity the menu always comes with poison. And without waiting for an answer, I turned around. I left the dining room, climbed the stairs, and heard Linda's broken voice behind me starting to cry with rage, and her sister's murmurs of comfort. Poor thing, do not get upset. It is not worth it. She will get tired. He will put her in her place. I entered the bedroom and closed the door, not with a slam, but with a sharp definitive click. I leaned against the wood, taking a deep breath. I did not cry. The anger was too solid, too pure to turn into tears. I opened the closet and took out my small travel suitcase. Not to leave, not yet, but to remind myself that I had somewhere to go. My mother's house. My house. I looked at the phone. No call from Derek, no message. Surely, at that moment, Linda was already giving him her devastated version of how the deranged daughter-in-law had insulted the family and ruined the gathering. I left the phone on the nightstand. I would wait. I would wait for him to come upstairs, to knock on the door, to for once ask, "What happened? Are you okay?" But the part of me that was already starting to get used to disappointment knew that he would not. That he would lower his head, accept the reproaches, and then come to ask me with a tired voice to please, for the peace of the family, apologize. That it costs nothing. That it will pass. And then I also knew what I would do. I would not apologize. I would not yield. I would never lower my head again. The battle had begun, and I was finally ready to fight. Not with shouting, not with tears. With the truth and with the papers that were waiting for their moment at the back of my closet. Derek came up hours later. He did not knock on the door. He opened it and walked in with the tired air of someone who has endured an interrogation. He found me sitting on the edge of the bed, still dressed, staring into space. I had not cried. The anger had solidified into a cold, heavy slab in the center of my chest. "Seriously, Brooke?" That was his greeting. His voice, a mix of annoyance and disappointment. "Seriously, what?" I asked without looking at him. "Today. Did you have to make such a scene in front of Aunt Barbara and everyone? My mother is devastated. She says you humiliated her in her own home." Finally, I looked at him. I saw his furrowed brow, his tense mouth. I did not see worry. I did not see curiosity. Only the annoyance of the peacemaker whose job had just gotten complicated. I humiliated her? My voice sounded flat, strange even to my own ears. "Did she tell you what Gary said? Or what your mother said about my work, about my life?" "They are just comments, Brooke. Things people say. There is no bad intention. They are from another era, you know that. All you had to do was smile and change the subject. Not make a scene." He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "God, now I have to call Aunt Barbara to apologize." I stood up. The slab of cold in my chest seemed to expand. "You apologize? Why?" "Because your wife could not stand her career being treated as sordid and her life as a matter of public debate? Because she did not accept being told her place was to serve water and keep quiet? Do not exaggerate," he almost shouted, lowering his voice immediately, aware that his parents were on the other side of the wall. "No one said that. You are blowing things out of proportion. You always do. You take everything as a personal attack. You always do." Those words like small knives dug in. It was his mantra, his way of disarming me, of turning my defense into hysteria, my dignity into sensitivity. "No, Derek, I do not always do it. I have been smiling and keeping quiet for months. I have endured comments, hints, demands. I have tried to adapt just like you asked me to. And you know what? It does not work. Because adapting to this means disappearing. It means becoming your mother's shadow. That is not fair," he muttered, looking away. "My mother wants what is best for us. Your mother wants what is best for you. For her idea of you. And I do not fit into that idea. I never will. And instead of standing by my side, of telling them to respect me, you ask me to shrink, to not make a scene." I took a step toward him. "What am I to you, Derek? Your wife. Or a family logistics problem that needs to be managed without making noise." "You are my wife," he said, and for the first time I saw a flash of something other than annoyance. It was pain. "And that is why it is so hard. I do not want to have to choose." "But you are choosing," I snapped, and the coldness of my voice seemed to surprise him. "You choose every day. Every time you stay quiet. Every time you ask me to yield. You are choosing her peace. Not ours." He stayed silent, looking at the floor. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the lamp's transformer. What do you want me to do, Brooke? He finally asked with a tired voice. Yell at my mother? Give her an ultimatum? Kick her out of the house? She is my mother. There it was, the core of everything. The house. My house. The words burned on my tongue. It is my house, Derek. Not your mother's. But I did not say them. No, not yet. Saying them right now, in this anger, would be using them as a weapon. And although part of me wanted to do it, another colder, more calculating part knew it was a truth that should be saved for the precise moment. For when it was not a shout in an argument, but an unappealable statement. I do not want you to kick anyone out, I said. And it was true. I want you to support me, to defend me. To at least once say, that is my wife, and is that how you speak about her? Is that how you treat her? It is not everything. It is so little. And at the same time it feels like I am asking you to move a mountain. Derek slumped into the armchair by the window. He looked defeated. It is not that simple. You do not know her like I do. She is very rigid. If I confront her, it will only make things worse. For everyone. For you too. And what is this, Derek? I asked, spreading my arms. Is this not already worse? Me locked up in here, feeling like a stranger in my own home, and you down there apologizing to them for my existence. Is this the peace you want to preserve? He did not know how to answer. He just shook his head, trapped in his labyrinth of conflicting loyalties. The man I married, the one who promised to be my team, my refuge, was sitting 10 feet away from me, but he was a stranger. An ally who had laid down his arms before the battle even began. I need you to try, he finally whispered without looking at me. For us. Just ignore her comments. Do not give them importance. Focus on us. That was the last straw. The final order. Ignore. Do not give it importance. The ultimate invalidation. I cannot, I said. And my voice no longer had any emotion in it. I am not going to do it. I am not going to allow anyone, not your mother or anyone else, to treat me with less respect than I deserve. And if that ruins your peace, I am sorry. But I have already lost mine. I walked out of the bedroom. He did not try to stop me. I walked down the stairs. In the living room, Linda and Robert were watching television, sitting together on the couch. A picture of marital tranquility. Linda shot me a quick, sideways glance, full of silent reproach, and then went back to watching the screen, squeezing her husband's arm. Robert did not even turn around. I went to the kitchen. I was not hungry, but I needed water. On the counter, gleaming and clean, was a tray with a covered plate. My separate cold dinner. There was nothing prepared for me at the table where they had surely eaten together, discussing my scene. I opened the fridge. Inside, in a container, were the leftovers of the roast beef. Next to it, a sticky note for Derek. Heat 2 minutes in microwave. Nothing for me. There it was, the silent punishment. The exclusion. It was no longer just words. It was clear, deliberate action. If you do not play our way, you do not play. I grabbed a glass, poured myself water, and went upstairs to the guest room where I had left my small suitcase. I did not go into our bedroom. I could not be near him at that moment. I lay down on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, and felt the slab of cold in my chest crack, letting out a sharp, lonely pain. I did not cry. I just took deep breaths over and over. The next day, the Cold War intensified. Linda no longer spoke to me directly. She spoke through Derek or Robert. Tell Brooke that if she is going to use the washing machine, she should not mix colors. Ask your wife if she is having dinner today so I know whether to set a plate for her or not. Robert, for his part, had adopted the tactic of absolute silence, as if I were an invisible and uncomfortable piece of furniture. Derek tried to act as if nothing was happening. Mom is a little hurt. She will get over it. He would tell me in the mornings, avoiding my gaze. At night he would go to bed late, pretending to be asleep when I entered our room. The distance between us was no longer subtle. It was an ocean of unspoken things, unhealed wounds, broken expectations. One afternoon, arriving home, I found the three of them in the living room laughing. Really laughing. Derek was telling some story from work, and his mother was laughing with that clear, warm laugh of hers that she never directed at me. They went quiet the exact moment they saw me. The silence was as abrupt as a slamming door. "Hi," I said. "Hi," Derek muttered. Linda nodded without smiling and went back to her knitting. Robert grunted something unintelligible. I went up the stairs. Every step echoed in the emptiness I myself inhabited. In our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed. The loneliness was a physical weight. It was no longer just Linda's opposition. It was the exclusion. Being the outsider, the one who altered the family chemistry. Derek, in trying not to take sides, had chosen a side. The side of the fictitious peace built on my silent submission. Then I saw it on Derek's nightstand. A travel agency brochure. Romantic getaway to the California coast. Picked it up. It was for 1 month from now. He had not said anything to me. Maybe it was a surprise, a clumsy attempt to fix things. But as I flipped through it, a folded piece of paper slid out. Linda's handwriting, round and neat. "Derek, honey, I saw this and thought it might be good for just the two of you. A little air away from routines, to talk, to reconnect. Sometimes a change of scenery fixes everything. Love you, Mom." It was not a surprise from Derek. It was a prescription from his mother. An order disguised as a gift. Just the two of you, away from her influence perhaps, but following her script. To reconnect, meaning for me to get back into the fold. I left the brochure on the nightstand as if it had burned me. It was no longer enough to ignore her, to endure. She was directing with a firm hand, even her son's attempts at reconciliation. She was everywhere. In every silence, in every look, in every plate she did not set for me, in every trip she planned for us. I went to the closet. On the top shelf, behind the winter clothes, was the small box of important documents. I opened it. Passports, insurance policies, our marriage certificate, and underneath the slightly wrinkled manila folder. I took it out. I sat on the floor leaning against the bed and pulled out the papers. There was the deed of sale. The date from years ago, my grandmother Evelyn's name, and then the life estate clause for my mother. And the inheritance clause, clear, unappealable. Appears as the sole and legitimate owner of the property, Brooke Thompson. I traced them with my fingertips. They were not just papers. They were an anchor. They were the most tangible truth in the midst of that sea of disdain and manipulation. My house. This roof, these walls that had witnessed my humiliation were mine. Every tile, every door, every crack in the plaster. Linda acted like the owner, the undisputed matriarch, but she was an intruder. A guest I had let in out of love for her son, and who now wanted to kick me out. A strange, cold, resolute calm came over me. I no longer felt anger. I felt clarity. I had tried the path of patience, of adaptation. I had hit a wall. Derek had tried his version of neutrality. He had only succeeded in deepening the crack. These papers changed the rules of the game. I did not want to use them. God, I did not want to have to use them. But I had them. And knowing it, holding them in my hands, gave me a strength I had not felt in months. I no longer felt like an outsider. I felt like an owner who was being challenged on her own turf. And an owner, when cornered, has the right and the duty to reclaim what is hers. I carefully folded the papers and put them back in the folder. Not in the back of the closet. I put them inside my work purse, where they would be close. Where, if the moment came, I could reach them. The moment would come. I could sense it in the hostile silence of the house, in my husband's evasive gaze, in Linda's satisfied smile when she thought I was not looking. It was no longer about winning their acceptance. It was about establishing once and for all what the boundaries were. And the boundaries now I knew with steel certainty. I set them. Aunt Barbara's visit this time was announced as an event of state. Linda cleaned, polished, and cooked for 2 days with a feverish energy. The message was clear. This would be a reparation. A demonstration of the normality and family tradition that, according to her, I threatened. I, for my part, mentally prepared myself. I would be polite. I would be cold. I would be flawless. I would not give them a single reason to complain. Or so I thought. Barbara arrived alone. "Gary has a card game," she announced, as if that explained everything. She wore a tight dress and a smile of pity that looked me up and down. "Brooke, how pale you look. Work, I imagine. You should take more iron, honey, for your blood." "I take what is necessary." "Thank you." I replied with a smile that did not reach my eyes. The meal began with a tension you could cut with a knife. Derek next to me was stiff as a board. He tried to make trivial conversation about the weather, about work. It was like trying to put out a fire with a spray bottle. Linda served the beef stew with solemnity. I let it rest for exactly 12 hours like my mother used to do. You have to respect the timing of things. Right, Derek? Derek nodded, keeping his eyes on his plate. Yes, Mom, it is delicious. Of course it is delicious. When things are done right, they turn out well. Linda shot me a quick look before serving her sister. Barbara, you who always cooked for a regiment, you understand me. Oh yes. Men have to be fed well. A well-fed man is a happy man, and a happy man makes a happy home. Barbara took a sip of wine. It is a pity that young women today do not have time for these things. Everything is work rushing around. And family needs time. Dedication. Many of us manage to balance both, I said, sticking my fork into a piece of meat. My voice sounded calm, too calm. Balance. Barbara laughed, a sound like broken glass. Darling, it is called neglecting one for the other. You are either a good professional or you are a good wife and mother. To divide yourself is to do things halfway. Do you not think, Linda? Linda tilted her head with false modesty. Well, I am not one to judge. I only know that I chose my path and my family has never lacked for anything. Robert, do you want more? Robert, at the other end of the table, held out his plate without saying a word. His silence was his most resounding approval. Times change, Aunt, Derek said, forcing a light tone. Things are different now. Change, Barbara replied as if Derek had made a joke. What does not change is nature, nephew. The man brings home the bread. The woman creates the home around that bread. That is the natural order. Trying to alter it only brings unhappiness. Her eyes settled on me again. And tension. A lot of tension. I felt the heat rising up my neck. I took a deep breath. I would not take the bait. Unhappiness usually comes when you live worrying about other people's natural orders, instead of creating your own, I said, taking a sip of water. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Linda gently put down her silverware. Brooke, honey, there is no need to get defensive. My sister is just making a comment. We are from another generation, you know that. It is hard for us to understand certain choices. It is not about understanding them, Linda, I replied, keeping my eyes on her. It is about respecting them. But of course they are respected, Barbara intervened, placing a hand on her sister's arm in a gesture of false conciliation. We are only saying that sometimes in the rush to have it all you lose what is essential. What truly gives happiness. Like children, for example. She paused dramatically, looking alternately at Derek and me. And that topic, when are the grandkids coming, Linda? Because your clock is ticking, woman. Derek choked slightly on his wine. Aunt, please, that is our business. Of course it is your business. But the family can also get excited, right? A house without children is a sad, cold house. Barbara looked around as if evaluating the temperature of the room. A child gives meaning to a marriage. It gives it permanence. Without that, what is left? Two people living together, each doing their own thing. That is not a family. That is a shared apartment. The description was so deliberately cruel, so precise in its intent to hurt, that it took my breath away for an instant. I saw Linda suppress a smile of satisfaction. I saw Robert nod almost imperceptibly. I saw Derek looking at his plate as if salvation was written there. A family, I said, putting my glass on the table harder than intended, is defined by many things, Barbara. Mutual respect, for example. Support. Not just by a birth certificate. Respect is earned, Robert said, speaking for the first time. His voice, deep and slow, cut the air like a knife. We all turned to him. And it is earned by fulfilling your duty. Everyone with their own. Society works that way. Family too. And what is my duty, Robert? I asked defiantly. I was at my limit. Courtesy had evaporated. Robert looked at me with that imperturbable calm of someone who believes they possess absolute truth. Your duty is to be my son's wife. To support him, care for him, give him a home and in time give him children. That is what is natural. The rest. He made a vague, dismissive gesture with his hand. The rest are whims. Modern ideas that in the end make no one happy. You first. Your unhappiness shows, girl. It shows on your face. It was like a slap, not verbal but physical. Derek finally reacted. Dad, that is too much. It is the truth, son, Linda said in her sweetest voice, the impassive voice of reason. Your father only wants what is best for you. For both of you. But sometimes love has to tell the truth, even if it hurts. Brooke is a smart, hard-working girl, but she lacks humility. She lacks accepting her place. Deep down, we all need to find our place. And a woman's place. She paused, staring at her wine glass as if searching for the exact words in its reflection. Then she looked up and looked directly at me, with a smile that did not reach her cold eyes. Well, a woman's place has never been equal at the men's table, has it? Her strength is elsewhere. In discretion. In restraint. In knowing how to be where she belongs. The world stopped for a second. It was not just another comment. It was the declaration of principles. The fundamental law. A woman's place has never been equal at the men's table. She had said it. Clear, crisp, without mincing words. It was no longer an insinuation, a hint. It was the naked truth of her world, put on the table like another dish. Barbara nodded gravely. It is the absolute truth, Linda. As much as they insist on denying it now. A woman in her place is the pillar of everything. Out of her place, she only causes imbalance. Confusion. I looked at Derek. His face was pale. His mouth was slightly open, as if he wanted to say something but no sound came out. His hands on the tablecloth were motionless. I waited 1 second. 2. I waited for him to break that complicit silence. To defend his wife. Our marriage. The very idea that we were equals. Just one word. Stop, that is enough. He said nothing. The slab of coal that had been in my chest for weeks shattered all at once. But not to release anger. To release absolute, crystalline, deadly calm clarity. There was no more room for doubt. There was no more room for patience. They had drawn the line with words as sharp as razor blades. And Derek, my husband, had stayed on the other side of it. Everything became very slow. I saw Linda's smile of satisfaction, sure of her victory. I saw Robert's look of approval. I saw Barbara's self-righteous pity. And I saw Derek, my Derek, staring blankly at his plate, absent, defeated before the battle. The air I breathed burned my lungs. It was not anger. It was the certainty of an end. The end of the lie. Of hope. Of the belief that this could be fixed. They had chosen their side, and they had left me alone on mine. Without saying a word, without making a sudden movement, I left my napkin next to my plate. I did not get up. I did not shout. I just looked at Linda. I held her gaze long enough for her smile to freeze, slightly insecure at my silence. Then I looked at Derek. He finally looked up, and what he saw in my eyes must have scared him, because he grew even paler. I stood up then with a calm that felt alien, supernatural. Conversations died. Silverware hung suspended in the air. Excuse me, I said. And my voice sounded clear and strange in the silent dining room. I have suddenly lost my appetite. And without waiting for an answer, I turned around. I left the dining room. I went up the stairs. I heard Barbara's voice behind me whispering but loud enough for me to hear. You see? She does not even know how to endure polite conversation. What a lack of manners, Linda. What a lack of respect. And Linda's voice replying with a martyr's sigh. Leave her, sister. She will learn. Oh no. But my son cannot live like this forever. Those were the last words I heard before closing the door to our bedroom. Not the guest room. Our bedroom. I leaned against the door. I breathed 1, 2, 3 times. The calm was a glacier. Cold, relentless. I went straight to the closet. I took out my work purse, unzipped the inner pocket, and there, between law firm documents and a pack of tissues, was the manila folder. I took it out. I opened it. The deed. My name. I looked at them. They were not papers. They were a key. The key to my cage. Downstairs, the conversation had started again. I could hear the murmurs, the clinking of silverware. Life went on without me as if I had never been there. As if my place indeed was not at that table. But my place was somewhere else. In these papers. In this truth. And it was time that everyone, absolutely everyone, knew it. I did not go down immediately. I waited. I heard the sound of the coffee maker, of plates being cleared. I waited for normality, their false normality, to fully resume. I wanted them comfortable, secure, convinced of their victory. I wanted the impact to be absolute. I sat on the edge of the bed with the folder on my lap. I was no longer trembling. I was no longer doubting. I was only planning. Linda's words echoed in my head over and over again. A woman's place has never been equal at the table. Very well, Linda. Very well, Robert. Very well, Barbara. If my place was not at your table, there would be no table. And if there was no table, there would be no lies. There would be no submission. There would be no more games. There would only be truth, hard, cold, unappealable as a notarized document. I waited until I heard the television in the living room. Until I was sure they were all in there, settled in their domestic triumph. Then I stood up. I fixed my hair. I wiped away a few tears I had not even felt falling. I stood up straight. The folder in my hand weighed nothing, and at the same time it weighed more than everything in that house. It was time to put the cards on the table. Or rather, to put the only card that mattered on the rubble of everything else. I walked down the stairs step by step with a deadly calm. My heart was pounding, but not out of fear. Out of certainty. The sound of a television show, canned laughter, came from the living room. I took a deep breath in front of the closed door. Then I opened it. The living room door yielded with a soft creak. All four of them were there, settled in their oasis of false normality. Linda and Barbara on the sofa with their coffees. Robert in his armchair, the sports newspaper open on his lap. Derek standing by the mantelpiece, playing with a lighter, his back tense. The television show, a silly comedy, filled the room with fake laughter that sounded like mockery. They all turned their heads toward me. Surprise came first. Then disdain appeared in Linda's eyes. In Barbara's, a morbid curiosity. Robert frowned, annoyed by the interruption. Derek looked at me, and in his eyes I only saw a mute plea, a begging. Please do not start. Please let it go. I was not going to let it go. Not anymore. I closed the door behind me. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the suddenly silent room. Derek had turned off the TV with the remote. Brooke, Linda started in her sweetest voice, the voice she used to mark her territory disguised as condescension. Everything okay? I thought you had retired to your room. If you wanted coffee, you only had to ask. I ignored her comment. I walked to the center of the room, up to the low solid wood coffee table, where the cups, the silver sugar bowl, and the tray of cookies rested. A perfect domestic scene. Perfect lie. I have something to say. I began, and my voice did not tremble. It sounded flat, strange, like someone else's. Robert slowly lowered his newspaper. Barbara leaned forward greedily. Linda put on a smile of fake concern. Honey, if it is about earlier, there is no need. Water under the bridge. You know, we all say things without thinking. You thought about every word, Linda. I interrupted her without raising my voice. And you, Barbara. And you, Robert. You thought about them and you said them with full intent. Derek left the lighter on the mantelpiece. Brooke, please. This is going nowhere. He is right, Derek, Barbara said, shaking her head with an air of sorrow. Grumbling about what has already been said is not for polite people. Better leave it be. Grumbling. Like I was a growling dog. The glacier inside me became denser, colder. I am not grumbling. I am clarifying. For the last time. I took a breath. I looked each of them in the eye. I have spent months enduring comments, slights, demands. I have tried to adapt. I have kept quiet. I have smiled. I have turned the other cheek. And the only thing I have achieved is that you step on that cheek too. Today at that table you have made clear what you think. That my place is not next to my husband. That my work is sordid. That my body and my life are a matter of public debate. That I am, at best, a failed wife project who needs to be anchored with a child to become a real person. Brooke, you are exaggerating, Linda protested, turning red. No one said that. You said it, Linda. Word for word. You said, A woman's place has never been equal at the men's table. I repeated her words slowly, driving them in like nails. That has been your truth from day one. Only today you took off your masks. Robert sat up in his armchair. His challenged authority emerged with full force. Enough. This is intolerable. I demand an apology on behalf of myself and my family, and this matter is considered closed. You will go to your room right now, and tomorrow we will speak like adults. A shiver of satisfaction ran through the room. Robert had spoken. The patriarch had passed sentence. Even Derek nodded slightly, relieved that someone was taking charge. I looked at them. At Linda, satisfied. At Barbara, enjoying the show. At Robert, believing that with one order everything would return to normal. At Derek, hoping I would obey, that I would lower my head, that I would yield for peace. For his peace. For everyone's peace except mine. And I knew with absolute certainty that I would never do it again. I smiled. It was a strange smile devoid of warmth. It unsettled them. Like adults, you say, Robert. All right. Let us speak like adults. I took a step toward the coffee table. I looked at it. Solid oak. Heavy, sturdy. Like their traditions. Like their world. Let us start with the table. I reached out my hands. It was not a sudden movement. It was deliberate, slow, like in slow motion. I grabbed the edge of the heavy table from underneath. I felt the smooth, cold wood against my palms. Brooke, what are you doing? Derek's voice was a threat of panic. I did not answer. I took a deep breath, and then, with all the strength given to me by contained frustration, silenced desperation, and months of accumulated humiliation, I pulled up and toward me. The world erupted into a crash of breaking glass, wood hitting the floor, and porcelain shattering into pieces. The heavy table flipped over like a downed animal. The coffee cups flew, smashing against the wall, staining the beige rug brown. The silver sugar bowl rolled with a hollow metallic sound. The cookies scattered like miserable confetti. The coffee, still hot, splashed Barbara's shoes, and she let out a sharp scream. The silence that followed the crash was absolute. Eternal. All four of them stared at me, petrified, mouths agape, unable to process what had just happened. The mess, the pure, cathartic release of that act was completely alien to their orderly, controlled world. It was Robert who reacted. First, he jumped to his feet, his face congested with purple rage. A broken glass crunched under his shoe. Crazy, he roared, and his voice came out strangled, tremendous. You are completely out of line. Pointing a trembling finger at me, he took a step forward. His authority was now a wounded, dangerous animal. This is unbelievable. Unacceptable. In my house. After everything we have done for you. Linda, pale as wax, started to moan, bringing her hands to her mouth. Barbara hugged her, shooting me looks of pure hatred. Look what you have done. Look at this disaster. Robert shouted, spitting the words. This is over. It is over. Do you hear me, Derek? He turned to his son, who was paralyzed, his face contorted in horror. Do you see? Do you see who you married? An unhinged woman. Every insult was a whip crack, but they did not reach me anymore. I was in a center of perfect calm. In the eye of the hurricane I myself had created. I do not want to see this for another minute under my roof. Robert bellowed, choking on his own fury. You are leaving right now, and tomorrow first thing you are going to file divorce papers. Do you hear me? Divorce. Or I will kick you out myself. Derek, tell this woman to leave right now. Derek, white as the wall, opened his mouth but no sound came out. He was a ghost. A broken man. Everyone looked at me. They waited for my explosion, my crying, my flight. They expected his outburst of patriarchal fury to break me, crush me, make me disappear. Instead, I straightened up. I adjusted the jacket I wore over my shoulders, and then for the first time I smiled. A true, calm smile full of a terrifying peace. You are right, Robert, I said. And my voice sounded clear as glass in the heavy silence. Someone has to leave this house. I let my words float in the air, enjoying their bewilderment. Then with deliberate movements I opened my purse. I took out the manila folder, now a little worn at the corners. I held it up like a talisman. Like a sentence. But it is not going to be me, I added. and I dropped the folder onto the smashed remains of the flipped table. It landed with a thud on a coffee stain and pieces of porcelain. They all looked at the folder, then at me, not understanding. "What is that?" Linda managed to stammer, her crying paused by curiosity. "It is the truth," I said simply. "The truth that has always been here while you played at being the owners." Robert, with a grunt, lunged and grabbed the folder. He opened it with fingers made clumsy by anger. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. His face, previously red with fury, started to pale, then turned ashen. The hand holding the paper began to tremble. "No. This cannot be," he muttered. His voice was no longer a roar. It was a threat of disbelief. "What is it, Robert? What is wrong?" Linda asked, frightened by the change in her husband. Robert did not answer. He kept reading, turning pages faster and faster, as if expecting to find a clause, a signature, something that would disprove what he saw. He did not find it. Derek finally moved. He approached his father, looking over his shoulder. His eyes flew over the documents. I saw them widen. I saw the slow, terrible comprehension make its way into his gaze. Then he looked up at me. In his eyes there was no longer horror. There was something worse. A devastating understanding. "Brooke," he whispered. "Is this true?" "Read the deed, Derek," I said without moving. "Read it out loud so everyone can hear it." Derek took the papers from his father's trembling hands. He took a deep breath as if it took effort, and then with a hoarse, broken voice, he began to read. "In Chicago, Illinois, on July 15, 2016, before me, the notary appears Mrs. Evelyn Thompson, and executes the sale of the property located at, in her name." He paused, swallowing hard. His eyes jumped to the final clause to the inheritance page. "And by succession, her granddaughter, Mrs. Brooke Thompson, is declared the sole and legitimate owner of said property." The silence that followed was even deeper than the one that followed the crash of the table. It was the silence of a collapse. Of a world falling apart. Linda blinked as if she did not understand English. "What? What does that mean?" she asked, looking at her son, at her husband. "It means," I said, and every word fell like a pebble into a still pond, "that this house is not yours. That it never has been. It is mine. My grandmother left it to me. You are my guests. Guests whom, out of love for your son, I allowed to live here, to create a home here." I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Then I continued, looking directly at Robert. "So Robert, you are right. Someone has to leave. And the divorce," I added, turning slowly toward Derek, who looked at me as if he had never seen me before. "The divorce is a conversation I will have with your son, if there is anything left to talk about. But you too," I said, looking now at Linda and Robert, "you are no longer welcome under my roof." Linda let out a guttural sound, somewhere between a scream and a moan. She collapsed onto the sofa as if her legs had turned to jelly. Barbara held her, but she too was pale, slack-jawed, staring at the folder as if it were a snake. Robert tried to speak. He opened his mouth. Nothing. He clenched his fists, opened them, looked at the papers, then looked at me, then looked at the disaster of the flipped table, his authority shattered next to the coffee cups. He found no words. He found no strength. He only found an unappealable truth written on official paper, tearing the ground right out from under him. Without saying another word, I turned around. I walked toward the door. My footsteps echoed in the sepulchral silence. Reaching the threshold, I stopped. I did not turn back. I just spoke with my back to them. "You can pack your things. Have everything out in a week." And I left. I closed the living room door softly behind me. There was no slam. It was not necessary. In the foyer, I grabbed my coat and the purse I already had packed with the essentials by the door. I had prepared it the night before, not quite knowing why. Now I knew. I opened the front door. The cold night air of Chicago hit my face. It was free air. Air that did not smell of pot roast, resentment, and lies. I did not look back. I closed the door behind me and started walking down the street aimlessly, feeling for the first time in months that despite everything, despite the pain that was beginning to spring up like a black well under the calm, I was finally home. In my own skin. master of myself and my destiny, which was starting now, among the rubble of a broken table and the stunned silence of those who believed my place would never be at their level. The night air was a cold shower after the suffocating hell of the living room. I walked aimlessly. My legs were shaking, but they did not fail me. The adrenaline, that liquid ice that had sustained me, was beginning to dissipate, leaving a huge, trembling emptiness. In my purse the phone began to vibrate. Once, twice, 10 times. It was Derek. Then an unknown number, probably Linda or Robert from the landline. I silenced it. I was not ready. I could not hear their voices. I could not hear anything other than the wild beating of my own blood. I found myself in front of Grant Park. I went in. The yellowish lights of the street lamps painted long shadows. I sat on a bench under a bare tree. The cold from the metal seeped through my skirt. I shivered. Not from the cold but from the release. I had done it. I had really done it. I had flipped the table. I had dropped the truth like a grenade. And now the silence. I put my hands in my coat pockets. My fingers found a key. The key to my mother's apartment. She was away visiting a sister in Milwaukee. Her place would be empty, dark, silent. A refuge. But I could not move. Not yet. Inside the house the silence was so thick you could cut it. The manila folder lay on the remains of the table like a flag on a battlefield. Linda was the first to break the spell. A long, sharp moan that turned into convulsive crying. She clung to Barbara. It cannot be. It is a lie. A lie. She forged it. Robert was not crying. He stood staring at the papers that Derek now held in lifeless hands. His face had gone from the purple of anger to a leaden gray. The cold, legal reality had hit him harder than any shout. "Robert, tell me it is not true," Linda begged, her voice broken by sobs. "Tell me that woman is lying." Robert swallowed hard. He seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. It is the deed. It is authentic. The notary. The seal." His voice was a hoarse whisper. The evidence was indisputable. The man of order, of papers, of facts, could not deny what he had right before his eyes. "So what?" Linda shrieked desperately. "We have lived here for years. We have paid the HOA fees, the renovations. It is our house. We paid the expenses, Linda," Robert said with infinite fatigue. "Not the property. The property is hers." Derek finally moved. He carefully placed the papers on the sofa as if they burned. He brought his hands to his face, rubbing his eyes hard. When he lowered them, his gaze was lost, empty. "I knew it," he muttered to himself. "My mother once told me something years ago. That Brooke had a safety net, something from her grandmother. I thought it was money savings. I never thought it was this. And you?" Linda turned to her son, her pain mutating into anger. You are her husband. You have rights. Half of everything is community property." "No, Mom." Derek's voice sounded flat, hopeless. "We do not have community property. We signed a separation of property agreement because of the law firm in case of lawsuits. It was safer. Brooke suggested it. I agreed." Another blow. Linda backed away as if she had been slapped. Strategy, her last legal resort, vanished. Barbara, who had been quiet, absorbing the drama, finally spoke. Her voice was practical, icy. "Well, even if it is hers, she cannot just kick you out like that. You are family. You have lived here for years. You have rights or something like that. And even if you do not, it will require an eviction. That takes time. Plenty of time to fix things." Her sly suggestion hung in the air. Fix things. Pressure, manipulate, make Brooke's life impossible until she gave in. Or until Derek fixed his wife. But Derek looked up and looked at his aunt. For the first time in a very, very long time there was something solid in his gaze. Something that was not submission. "No," he said, with a firmness that surprised everyone, even himself. "We are not going to fix anything like that. We are not going to threaten her, harass her, try to steal more time from her." He turned to his parents. "She is right. It is her house. She let us live here for me. And we have treated her like a servant. Like an intruder. You are defending her now?" Linda stood up, trembling with indignation. After what she has done? After this scandal? This lack of respect? She flipped a table, Derek. She threatened us. And what did we do, Mom? Derek's voice broke. What did we do to her day after day? Humiliate her. Belittle her. Tell her she had no right to sit at her own table. God, Mom, you kicked her out of her own table. And I let you. I stayed quiet. It was the first time Derek had spoken to them like that. The first time he put words to his complicity. Linda opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She saw something in her son's eyes that terrified her more than the papers. Disappointment. Reproach. Robert found his voice again, but it was no longer the voice of the patriarch. It was the voice of a defeated man trying to cling to the remains of his dignity. It does not matter. It does not matter what we have done or not done. This is unprecedented. She humiliated us. She challenged us. We cannot stay here. Not after this. Where are we going to go, Robert? Linda moaned, panic peeking through the anger. We do not have savings for another place in Chicago. To rent at our age. You will come live with me, Barbara said quickly. In Peoria. We have room. It will be temporary. Temporary. The word sounded like a death sentence. Leaving Chicago. Her life. Her son. Leaving defeated for her sister's house. The humiliation was complete. Derek saw the horror in his mother's eyes, the defeat in his father's back, and suddenly felt the immense weight of his own guilt. He had brought them here. He had allowed this to grow. He was the bridge that had broken. I am sorry, he muttered, and the words burned in his throat. I am so sorry for everything. He grabbed his jacket and his phone from the coat rack. Linda noticed. Where are you going? Do not leave me now, Derek. I am going to look for her, he said without turning around. To look for her? After what she did to you. She kicked us out, Derek. Your parents. Derek stopped at the living room door. His back was rigid. She did not kick you out for no reason, Mom. And I have to talk to my wife. He walked out, leaving behind the disaster, his mother's crying, his father's abysmal silence, his aunt's critical gaze. He took the stairs 2 at a time. In his bedroom, everything was in order. Too much order. The bed made. The air freshener with its lavender scent. The photo of their wedding on the nightstand. They were smiling. He looked at her as if she were the center of his universe. When had she stopped being that? When he had allowed his world to fill with the noise of his mother until it drowned out his wife's voice. He went out into the street. The night swallowed him up. He called Brooke's cell phone over and over again. Just voicemail. He sent messages. Please, Brooke, talk to me. Tell me where you are. I am worried. I am sorry. I am so sorry. The words seemed ridiculous, insufficient, tiny compared to the abyss he had opened. On my bench in Grant Park, the phone lit up my purse over and over again. Every vibration was a whip crack. I could not. Not yet. I needed the distance. I needed to remember who I was without them. Without him. Finally I stood up. My legs answered me. I walked to the street and hailed a taxi. I gave him the address of my mother's apartment. As the city paraded by the window, I saw our neighborhood, our streets slipping away. I did not feel nostalgia. I felt a bittersweet, enormous relief. Like leaving a room where you have been slowly suffocating. My mother's apartment smelled of cleanliness and books, just like always. I turned on the light. The silence here was different. It was a welcoming mind silence. I collapsed onto the living room sofa. The adrenaline was completely gone, leaving an exhaustion that reached my bones. And then they started coming. Not the tears, not yet. The thoughts fast as knives. I had gone too far. Yes. Had it been necessary? Also yes. There was no other way to break the spell. The wall of contempt and tradition. I had broken it with an act of pure visceral release. And with a nuclear truth. My phone lit up again. A message from Derek. Please. I know you are angry. You have the right. But just tell me you are safe. Just that. I looked at the message. The part of me that still loved him, that loved the man I married, shivered. He was worried. It was not fake. But the other part, the newborn one, the one of the woman who had flipped the table, was skeptical. Worry for me? Or for the consequences? For the scandal? For having to face his parents? I did not reply. I turned off the phone. I needed a whole night of silence, of peace, of being the absolute owner of the air I breathed. While I prepared some chamomile tea in the silent kitchen, I imagined the scene I had left behind. The chaos, the disbelief, the anger, the fear. And maybe in Derek's eyes, the beginning of a terrible understanding. I was not happy about it. But I did not regret it. The battle had perhaps ended. Or perhaps it had just truly begun. But for the first time the rules were set by me. And the first rule was simple: my peace. My house. My life. Everything else, including a man I still loved, but whom I had had to lose to find myself, would have to wait. Or find its place in this new world that had just been born, between the sound of a breaking table and the deafening silence of a truth spoken out loud. 3 days passed. 3 days of a silence that in my mother's apartment was restorative, and in my own must have been deafening. I did not turn on my phone until the morning of the second day. Dozens of missed calls from Derek. A couple from my mother-in-law, instantly blocked. A laconic strange message from Robert. "Brooke, we must speak like adults." I ignored it. And several messages from my mother. "Honey, your mother-in-law called me." Hysterical. "What happened? Are you okay? Call me." I did reply to her with a brief, "I am fine, Mom. I will tell you everything when you get back. It is long. Do not worry." On the third day at dusk, the intercom in my mother's apartment rang. My heart skipped a beat. I knew it was him before I heard his voice, heavy with static and infinite fatigue. "Brooke. It is me. Please." I did not say anything. My hand rested on the door release button. I could choose not to press it. I could let him leave. I could prolong this silent limbo where only my pain and anger existed, but also my brand new peace. I pressed the button. A sharp click. The door downstairs opened. I waited for him at the open apartment door. He walked up the stairs slowly. When he appeared on the landing, it was hard to breathe. He looked like he had aged a decade. Sunken eyes, a few days' beard, the same wrinkled clothes from the day of the explosion, or maybe one's just like them. He looked at me, and in his eyes there was no reproach, only a pain so deep and naked that it physically hurt me to see it. "Come in," I said and stepped aside. He walked in. I closed the door. We stood in the small foyer, like two strangers in a waiting room. "Do you want something? Water, coffee?" I offered just to say something. He shook his head. Swallowed. "They are leaving tomorrow. For Peoria. To Aunt Barbara's house." The news struck me despite everything. I had said it. I had demanded it. But hearing that they were really leaving was an earthquake. I nodded, unable to find words. I have been looking for an apartment for myself these past few days. A small rental. He spoke slowly, measuring each word as if walking on broken glass. And talking to my parents. Really talking. This time without yielding. "And what did you tell them?" I asked, unable to hold back. "I told them they had treated you terribly. That I had been a coward. That what you did, flipping the table," he paused, searching for strength, "was the consequence of everything we had done before. I told them that it is your house. That they had to leave. And that I was going with them to help them settle in, but that my life was here in Chicago. And that I wanted to try to fix things with you. If there was still anything left to fix." I leaned against the wall. I could not trust his words. Not yet. "And what did they say?" A grimace of bitterness distorted his mouth. "My mother cried. She said I was betraying her. That you were a manipulator who had turned me against my family. My father did not say much. I think he is ashamed of everything. Of how we treated you. Of having lived all these years in a house that was not his without knowing it. Of the scene of everything. I think he just wants to leave and not look back." The picture he painted was bleak. But it did not move me. Not enough. "And you, Derek?" I asked, and my voice sounded harder than I intended. "What do you think? Do you think I am a manipulator? Do you think I exaggerated? That I should have endured more, kept quiet more, adapted more?" He looked up and finally looked directly at me. There were tears gathering in his eyes, but he did not let them fall. I think you were at your limit. And we pushed you. I pushed you every time I stayed quiet, every time I asked you for peace at the cost of your dignity. His voice broke. The table thing. God, Brooke, it was terrifying. But it did not come out of nowhere. It came from months of a silent pressure that we subjected you to. A pressure of contempt, of disdain, of not acknowledging you. You reached your breaking point. And you did it in the clearest, most catastrophic way possible. I cannot say it was right. But I can understand it. And I do not hate you for it. I admire you for having the courage I never had. They were the words I had needed to hear for months. And now that I was hearing them, I knew they were no longer enough. The bridge was too damaged. And what happens now, Derek? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. An instinctive barrier. Your parents leave, they apologize, you move back in, and everything goes back to the way it was? Because it cannot be like before. I am not the woman I was before. I do not want it to be like before, he exclaimed with a burst of passion. Before was horrible. Before I was a scared little boy and you were a shadow of who you are. I do not want that. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I do not know what happens now, Brooke. I only know that I love you. That I have been an idiot, a coward, and that I have lost everything because I did not know how to live up to the man I promised to be when I married you. And if I have to spend the rest of my life trying to earn your trust back, I will. I will live in my rental apartment. I will see you when you want to, or I will not see you. Whatever you say. But do not ask me to sign divorce papers without fighting for this. For us. The us resonated in the room. It was no longer his mother's us that meant submission. It was something else. A remote, shattered possibility, but still alive. I am not asking you to sign for a divorce, I said, and I saw the flash of hope in his eyes. At least not yet. But I am not promising you anything either, Derek. The damage is very deep. Not just from your parents. It is that when I needed you, you were not there. And that is not fixed with an I am sorry and a change of apartment. I know, he whispered. I know. I am just asking for a chance. To show you that I have understood. That I can change. That I want to change. Not for my mother, not for peace. For you. For me. For what we used to be. I walked over to the window. Chicago was lighting up down below. A city full of lives moving on, of problems, of broken and remade loves. Go to Peoria with them, I said without turning around. Help them settle in. And then come back. Find your apartment. Live your life. I need time. Real time. To live in my house. Alone. To remember who I am when I am not defending myself from anyone. To see if the love you have for me is stronger than the habits of a lifetime, than the chains of your family. And we will see each other, he asked from behind, with the voice of a man begging for charity. We will see each other, I agreed. Like before. Like two people who are getting to know each other. Who have a very, very tough history to overcome. Without pressure. Without deadlines. Without children to anchor us. Step by step. Can you do that? Can you accept my conditions, my time, my space? There was a long silence. Then I heard his footsteps approaching. He stopped behind me without touching me. Yes, he said. And in that simple word there was a surrender, but also the first glimpse of a new strength. I accept your conditions. Your time. Your space. It is your right. You have earned the right to decide all that. Through hard work, through the bravery that I lacked. I turned around. I looked him in the eyes. He was no longer the frightened boy seeking mom's approval. He was a tired, broken man, but with his eyes wider open than I had seen them in years. Go then. And when you come back, call me. He nodded. He did not try to kiss me. He did not try to hug me. He turned around and headed for the door. There he stopped. I love you, Brooke. The woman who flipped the table. The lawyer. The owner of her house. The one who will not let herself be walked all over. I love that woman. And I will fight for her until you tell me there is nothing left to fight for. And he left. The door closed softly. I collapsed onto the sofa. A dry, harsh sob tore through my chest. I cried for the first time since it all happened. I cried for the anger, for the pain, for the loss. For the tiny fragile hope I had just planted. For the Derek who had been and who maybe, just maybe, could come to be. And for the Brooke who had had to destroy everything in order to finally begin building herself up. The house smelled of fresh paint. I had redecorated the living room. A new table, more modern, lighter. Not solid oak. Glass and metal. Transparent with no ghosts underneath. Linda and Robert lived in Peoria. According to Derek's sparse and tense messages, they were not adapting well. Linda missed Chicago, her son, her lost kingdom. She complained that Barbara was bossy. Robert spent his days in a bar reading the newspaper. It was an exile they had earned themselves. Derek lived in a small studio in Wicker Park. We would go to dinner sometimes or grab a coffee. We truly talked. About our families, our fears, what we had done wrong. Sometimes we argued. Sometimes the old Derek, the one who looked for the easy way out, poked his head out. But now I saw him coming, and now he did too. And he would stop, apologize. We learned. It was not easy. The mistrust was a heavy burden. But there was space. And there was respect. A new respect, earned the hard way on the battlefield of a dining room. One afternoon, strolling through Grant Park, near the bench where I had sat that night, Derek took my hand. It was not a possessive gesture. It was a question. Do you think one day I will be able to come home? He asked, looking straight ahead. I do not know, I answered honestly. This house is not the same anymore. I am not the same anymore. Maybe coming back is not the right word. Maybe it is finding a new place together. But without rushing. Without fear. He nodded. He squeezed my hand. Without rushing. Without fear. We kept walking. The future was uncertain. A path full of rubble to clear and new foundations to build. But for the first time I was walking on ground that was mine. Ground of truth, of respect, of a peace that was not based on silence, but on the freedom to raise my voice. And looking at the man beside me who was trying to learn to walk at my pace, I knew that although love alone was not enough, a love that had walked through the fire and had finally decided to fight clean, maybe, just maybe, could be a good start. Did you enjoy this story? Leave a comment and hit the subscribe button to support the channel. More tales are on the way.